It was late, the kind of night that felt too quiet, too still, as though something was waiting. A night where the wind carried more than just air, and the shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far. Emma had been driving for hours, the tires of her car humming steadily along the empty highway. The moon hung high, casting a cold glow over the long deserted road. Her phone had died hours ago, and with no signs of civilization for miles, she was beginning to feel that creeping sense of isolation. It wasn't unusual for Emma to find herself on these late-night drives, heading from one city to the next for work. But tonight, something felt different. The air was thick, almost oppressive, as if the world was holding its breath. As she rounded a bend, the headlights of her car illuminated something in the distance, something that made her heart skip a beat. A gas station. The neon sign flickered faintly, casting an eerie red light that barely cut through the darkness. She wasn't sure how she hadn't noticed it before. The last few miles had been desolate, and the road seemed to go on forever with no sign of life. And yet, here it was, this lonely station frozen in time, like something out of a bad dream. Emma's eyes scanned the place as she slowed the car. It wasn't abandoned, but it wasn't open either. The pumps stood silent, their metal arms frozen in place, and there was no movement inside the small, run-down building. A single light bulb buzzed faintly over the door. No one was in sight. She assumed the station was closed, but she needed to stretch her legs and grab a snack, anything to break the monotony of her drive. With her low fuel gauge, she couldn't risk going any further. With a reluctant sigh, Emma pulled into one of the empty spots near the pump. She got out of the car, feeling the chill of the night air bite at her skin. As she approached the door, something strange caught her eye. A piece of paper stuck to the window. She squinted, trying to make out the words. It looked like a hastily written note, though the ink was smudged, making it hard to read. The first few words stood out: "Do not stay after midnight." Her heart rate quickened, a strange unease crawling up her spine. Was this a warning? Maybe a prank? Who would leave such a note on a gas station window, especially out here in the middle of nowhere? She pushed the thought from her mind. There had to be a rational explanation. With a quick breath, she grabbed the door handle, and to her surprise, it opened easily. The bell above the door rang faintly, a sound that echoed through the empty space. As she stepped inside, the first thing she noticed was the smell. It wasn't the typical scent, gasoline, or stale coffee. It was something metallic, almost like blood. Emma wrinkled her nose in disgust, briefly wondering if something had happened here recently. The interior was dusty, with old newspapers scattered across the counter and dim lights flickering from the ceiling. Aging snack racks lined the walls, their contents barely recognizable through the layers of grime. Her eyes wandered to the far end of the building, where a door led to what appeared to be a small back room. The fluorescent lights buzzed intermittently, casting strange shadows. There was no sign of the attendant, no sign of life. Emma walked up to the counter, her boots clicking sharply against the worn floorboards. She glanced behind it, expecting to find the cashier, maybe an old man, or someone working a late shift. But the area was empty. The counter was cluttered with papers and receipts, some yellowed with age. Her gaze lingered on a receipt near the register. It was dated for the previous day, the time stamped at 11:59. The station had looked completely closed when she pulled up, yet the receipt was fresh. Something didn't add up. Shaking off the feeling, Emma grabbed a pack of chips from the shelf and headed toward the back of the station. Maybe there was someone there, or at least a phone she could use to call for help. The door creaked loudly as she pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. The air here was stale, colder than the rest of the building. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to venture further into this strange place, but her curiosity got the better of her, and she stepped inside. The hallway led to another door, slightly ajar, a thin sliver of light spilling through. She could hear something faint, rhythmic, and unnatural. It was coming from inside the room. She couldn't stop herself. She had to know what it was. Her fingers brushed the cold doorknob as she pushed it open, and as she did, the humming grew louder, almost deafening. But when she stepped inside, her breath caught in her throat. The room was nothing like she had expected. It wasn't a storage area or an office. It was small, sterile, almost clinical. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols she couldn't quite recognize. The floor was spotless, the kind of cleanliness you'd expect in a hospital operating room. But the strangest thing of all was the figure standing in the middle of the room. A man, tall and thin, wearing a faded blue jumpsuit. His back was to her, but she could see that his hands were trembling, and his body swayed ever so slightly, as if caught in some kind of trance. Emma's heart hammered in her chest, and she took a step back, her hand resting on the door frame. The man's head jerked toward her, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out right. They were garbled, as if he were trying to force something past his lips, but his tongue couldn't form the sounds. Emma didn't know what to do. She should have run, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from him. "Help me." His voice was barely a whisper, raspy, as though it hadn't been used in years. Before she could react, the door slammed shut behind her, and the room plunged into complete darkness. The darkness enveloped Emma, thick and suffocating. Her breath came in sharp, panicked gasps as she stumbled backward, her hands reaching out to find something, anything to steady herself. The smell of iron, the same metallic scent that had greeted her upon entering the gas station, grew stronger. Her fingers brushed against the cold, smooth walls, but it felt like the darkness was closing in on her from all sides. She tried to focus on the sound of her own breathing, but even that seemed muffled, swallowed by the heavy silence. And then, in the midst of the dark, she heard it, a soft rustling, the unmistakable sound of feet shuffling, slow and deliberate on the hard floor. Emma's heart raced. She wasn't alone in here, that much was certain. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she pressed herself against the wall, her eyes straining to make out any shape or figure in the thick blackness. But there was nothing, just the sound of breathing, soft and labored, just out of reach. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling, barely louder than a breath. She didn't know why she asked. There was no answer. The air in the room shifted suddenly, as though something had moved too quickly in the darkness. Emma's pulse quickened, and she fought the rising panic in her chest. She couldn't stay in here. She needed to get out now. She spun around, blindly feeling for the door she'd entered through, but it was gone. The door, the hallway, it was as if the room itself had swallowed them up, leaving no trace of her escape route. Her mind raced. How could that be? How could it just disappear? The rustling grew louder, closer. And then she heard it, the faintest whisper, like a voice barely rising above the hum of the darkness. It was distant, but unmistakably there. "Turn around." Emma's blood ran cold. The whisper wasn't from the man she had seen earlier. This voice was different. It was older, hoarse, and it sounded as if it was right behind her, despite the fact that no one was standing in front of her. With trembling hands, Emma forced herself to turn. The room was still as empty as it had been moments before. Her eyes frantically scanned the walls, the corners, anything that could give her a clue to what was happening. But there was nothing. That's when she saw it. A faint light, almost imperceptible at first, glowing in the far corner of the room. It wasn't a natural light. It was a sickly greenish hue, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. Emma took a step toward it, her legs unsteady, her instincts screaming at her to turn around, to run. But her curiosity pushed her forward. She had to know. She had to understand what was going on here. As she approached the source of the light, her mind struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. The light emanated from a small, cracked mirror, hanging crookedly on the wall. But this wasn't a normal mirror. The glass shimmered, shifting in a way that no reflective surface should. It distorted the space around it, bending the room into strange shapes, as if the very fabric of reality was warping. Emma reached out cautiously, her fingers brushing the surface of the glass. The moment her skin made contact, the room seemed to lurch. The floor beneath her feet gave way, and the air felt thick with an overwhelming pressure. Her vision blurred, and she had to grab hold of the wall to steady herself. The humming sound from before returned, louder now, reverberating in her chest, vibrating her bones. The mirror flickered, and then she saw it. A figure like a shadow, but somehow more real, more solid. It emerged from the glass, its form twisted and distorted, stretching unnaturally. The face, if you could even call it that, was a hollow void, black and empty, staring at her with an unblinking intensity. A chill ran through Emma's body, freezing her to the spot. She couldn't move, she couldn't breathe. The figure raised a hand, pointing at her, its long bony fingers stretching farther than should have been possible. The air grew colder, and Emma felt a sensation, something like invisible fingers, closing around her throat, choking her. She gasped for breath, but it was as if the very atmosphere had thickened, pressing in on her, suffocating her. "Leave, now," the voice rasped, and this time there was no mistaking it. It was the voice of the man she had seen earlier, but it wasn't the same man. This wasn't a man at all. It was a thing, something that existed in a space, outside of time and reality, a presence that shouldn't have been in this world. It spoke again, its voice low and guttural, as if it came from the deepest pit of the earth. "Not after midnight." The words didn't make sense. What was happening? Why was she hearing this? What did it mean? Suddenly the figure jerked back, its form dissolving into the air like smoke. The room snapped back into focus, but the pressure didn't lift. The suffocating feeling lingered, and the temperature dropped sharply. Emma's breath came out in a visible cloud, the chill in the room now unbearable. She had to get out now. The mirror no longer pulsed with light. It was just an ordinary cracked piece of glass once again. But it didn't matter. Something in this place had been awakened, and it wasn't going to let her go without a fight. She turned to leave, her mind racing, heart pounding in her chest. She had to find the door. She had to. The light flickered. The door was back. Emma. She bolted toward the exit, the pounding of her feet echoing off the walls. But before she could reach it, the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, began to follow her. They echoed in the stillness, getting closer, until she could feel the hot breath of whatever was chasing her on her neck. Her skin crawled. The door. She was almost there. But as her hand reached out to grasp the handle, a cold, gnarled hand shot out from the darkness, gripping her wrist with inhuman strength. "No one leaves," Emma screamed, her voice shattering the quiet of the night. But the hand didn't release. Instead, it pulled her back into the shadows. The door slammed shut behind her, and the light went out. Emma's scream echoed in the darkness, but it was swallowed by the oppressive silence that hung heavy in the air. Her mind raced as she struggled against the unrelenting grip that held her wrist, pulling her deeper into the room. She kicked and twisted, but it felt like the shadows themselves were alive, grasping at her, dragging her back toward the dark heart of the gas station. Her pulse pounded in her ears as panic surged through her body. She had to get free. She had to escape. The figure, whatever it was, still loomed in the corner, its twisted form flickering in and out of existence. Its hollow void-like eyes were locked on her, its presence an unshakable weight pressing down on her chest. The cold was unbearable now, freezing her very bones, and the suffocating air made it impossible to breathe. "Let go of me," she gasped, her voice raw, trembling. Her whole body was shaking now, as if it wasn't just fear that gripped her, but something far more ancient, something that wanted to drain her very soul. The hand that held her tightened, and the thing in the corner moved closer, its long, unnatural limbs jerking toward her, like a marionette. The flickering light seemed to dance across its featureless face, and Emma could feel its gaze piercing through her. Her heart was hammering in her chest. She was going to die here, trapped in this cursed gas station. But then, something strange happened. The shadow paused. It didn't move forward, didn't reach for her. It simply stood there, as if waiting for something, waiting for her. "Leave," the voice rasped again, but this time it wasn't a man's voice. This was something else, something deeper, old. It wasn't just warning her, it was offering her an out. Confusion swirled in Emma's mind. but desperation fueled her resolve. The hand that had gripped her wrist released, and she felt the air around her lighten, just enough to give her a chance. Her heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. She spun around and sprinted for the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The shadows seemed to fight her every step, but she pushed forward, her legs feeling like lead as she ran. The door was ahead, just a few feet away. Emma reached for the handle, her hand trembling violently. As she gripped it, she pulled, but the door didn't budge. It was locked. She screamed in frustration and fear, her hands slamming against the door in a futile attempt to force it open. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't stay in this place. The voice whispered again, this time with a promise that sent ice through her veins. You can leave, but not yet, not until the time is right. Emma's blood ran cold. What did that mean? What time? What had happened to the gas station? What was this place? The room around her began to warp again, the walls twisting as though they were being sucked into some unseen void. Her vision blurred as the very space seemed to crumble around her. The humming sound returned, growing louder, more frantic. She turned and found the man, the one she had seen earlier, standing before her. His eyes were wide, frantic, as though he too was trapped in this nightmare. He reached for her, but the shadows swarmed in again, pulling him back, swallowing him whole. His body contorted in ways that should have been impossible. He screamed, his voice cutting through the madness, but it was too late. He disappeared into the void, vanishing without a trace. Emma was alone in the twisted room, with no way out. The light flickered again, and she looked up to see something that made her blood run even colder than before. The greenish glow from the mirror had returned, but this time it wasn't just the mirror, it was the walls, the ceiling, the floor, all of them seemed to pulse with that sickly green light. The very air around her shimmered, distorted, like the space itself was being torn apart. And then, from the corner of the room, the door appeared once more, the same door she had tried to escape through. But now, it was different. It was warped, stretched, as if it didn't quite belong here. Emma felt her body freeze in place, her mind screaming at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She was paralyzed, staring at the door that seemed to beckon her, calling her to it with a magnetic force she couldn't explain. She took a hesitant step toward it, the floor beneath her feet shifting with every movement. The door creaked as she reached for it again. Her fingers brushed the handle, cold and slick with an unnatural dampness, and then, it opened. Through the door, Emma could see something beyond the gas station. There was a road, an open field, a sky. It was the outside world, the world she had left behind, her escape, her way out. But as her hand gripped the door, she heard the voice again, soft and insistent. Not yet, you cannot leave until you understand. The world around her shifted again, and suddenly she was back in the hallway, standing just outside the gas station's dark, deserted interior. The door was gone, replaced by a narrow, crumbling passage that led deeper into the building. It felt like time itself had bent, like the world had unraveled around her. Emma spun around, but there was no way to escape. The gas station, this place was alive, in a way she could never have imagined. It was a trap, built on something ancient, something that had been waiting for her. It had always been waiting for someone. As she stood there staring at the ruined hallways, she felt the weight of the curse, something that would not let her leave. Not yet, and not ever. The station's hum, the whispers from the dark, and the unsettling hollow gaze of the figure in the shadows would haunt her forever. And so she stayed, trapped in the gas station that never closed, forever.